I call to order this hearing on case number G 2024-03, book challenge involving book title Pet. My name is Dr. Bessie G. Jackson. I'm the hearing agent for this case. Pursuant to Section 1006.28 Florida statute and other applicable law, each party will have an adequate and fair opportunity to be heard and to present evidence. I will listen to all the evidence presented by both sides of this case, and I will prepare a recommended order that will be submitted to the school board. At this hearing, both parties will have 1 hour to present their case, which includes the opening statement, presenting of evidence, questioning witnesses, and the closing statement. If a party does not use all of their time, the unused time will not be given to the other party to extend their allotted time. With the exception of evidence that is irrelevant, immaterial, unduly repetitious, I will accept all other evidence of a nature commonly relied upon by a reasonable, prudent person in the conduct of their affairs. Any part of the evidence may be presented to me in written form. All testimony shall be made under oath. Hearsay evidence may only be used for the purpose of submitting or explaining other evidence. To the petitioner and respondents, when presenting your evidence at the podium at the start of your presentation, be it a printed document, slide, or PowerPoint presentation, please tell me the exhibit number, slide title, or page number of that particular evidence location in your submitted material to the hearing officer in order to avoid delay in having to flip back and forth between exhibits. For convenience, state the location in your submitted packet or notebook before you begin. Oath with each party to this case and witnesses. Please come to the mic, state your name for the record, and please remain standing after you have done so for the swearing in. Witness for both parties to the mic, please.
The district will not be offering any witnesses.
Thank you. Please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Would you please state your name for the records?
Crystal Marule.
Keith Perry.
Thank you. You may be seated. Dr. Marule, you may begin.
My name is Crystal Marule. Are you going to start the time? Excuse me, there's no timer?
Yes.
It's... My name is Crystal Marule. I hold two master's degrees, 1 PhD, and multiple state teaching certificates, and I am a certified media specialist in the state of Florida. In addition, I am the parent of 3 students in the school district. This is the 6th hearing I have been put through to challenge inappropriate books. I requested a postponement of this hearing due to multiple personal time constraints limiting my ability to prepare adequately for this hearing, including my uncle's funeral yesterday morning. This request was denied. At the first hearing, I challenged A is for Activist, a picture book for 2 to 5-year-olds written by an open Marxist who celebrates violent Marxist revolutionaries like the Zapatistas. After that hearing, my right to present evidence without interruption and unreasonable time constraints was taken away, and I was informed I would only have 1 hour going forward to present my evidence and arguments. At the second hearing, I challenged the book Melissa, a chapter book for 8 to 12-year-olds, which follows the secret social transitioning of a 10-year-old boy. The book includes references to pornography and dirty magazines, hiding internet browser history, sharing panties with a friend, as well as a list of resources, including the Trevor Project, which directly connects students to therapists without parental consent. After that hearing, my right to call specific district employees was denied based on frivolous excuses of birthday plans. At the third hearing, I challenged the book It Feels Good to Be Yourself, a picture book for 5 to 7-year-olds that teaches kids that they can be a boy one day and a girl the next, or be both boy and girl at the same time, or be neither. It introduces terms like transgender, non-binary, and gender identity. It also includes resources like the Trevor Project. After that hearing, my right to call elementary school staff as witnesses was removed. At the fourth hearing, I challenged the book My Maddie, a picture book for 3 to 7-year-olds that teaches kids that not all mommies are girls and not all daddies are boys, but some are in between. After that hearing, my right to call any district staff or to cross-examine district witnesses has been taken away. After the fifth hearing, I challenged the book When Aiden Became a Brother, a picture book for 5 to 7-year-olds that follows the social transitioning of a 7-year-old girl into a boy. They cut her hair, change her clothes, and give her a new name, and redecorate her room. At that hearing, I speculated what right would be taken away from me, and I mused if it would be my right to speak. It turns out that was exactly what happened. I was told that the only recording available of that hearing would have no audio. They deleted my voice entirely. So today, at the sixth hearing, I again question what other rights of mine will be trampled as I, a parent, stand up and demand accountability for the content of books you are foisting onto our children. Today, I challenge the book Pet. This book is about a transgender boy who socially transitions at the age of 3, is chemically castrated at the age of 10, and physically castrated at the age of 15. He is possessed by a demon to fight off the monsters. Those are those who do not share his worldview, and particularly a monster who is sexually abusing his friend's little brother. This book is written by an author who self-identifies as an OGBANJE, a child demon which is born over and over again into the same family line to cause death and destruction. She also identifies as transgender, with multiple personalities, who experienced their first personality split when they were 16. To frame this challenge, I would like to take this opportunity to read an article written by the author herself, followed by a few pages from the text. Ultimately, you need to answer the question as to why you find it appropriate for our children to be exposed to Marxist ideologies cloaked in religiosity by an author who believes she herself is a demon-possessed, transgendered god. By Akwaeke Emenzi, title, Transition. My surgeries were a bridge across realities, a spirit customizing its vessel to reflect its nature. The robot was called Da Vinci. It was delicate, precise, inserted through my navel to slice my uterus and fallopian tubes into small, unimportant pieces, which were then suctioned out of my body. The procedure had a technical name that filled my mouth, a robotic-assisted subtotal hysterectomy with a bilateral salpingectomy. I had to repeat this about 7 times on the day of my surgery as nurses came in with forms clarifying that I knew what I was getting, but I didn't mind. I'd waited years for this surgery. In another life, I had trained to be a surgeon myself, dissecting cadavers and cutting through layers of dermis and fascia and muscles with a 10-blade. But in this life, I was a 28-year-old and cold, my numb skin wrapped in a hospital gown as the nurse draped warm blankets over me. Still, anticipation rang clear chimes. I couldn't wait for when they'd wheel me out of that operating room, finally sterile. It had been 5 years since I figured out I was transgender, after falling into a vibrant queer scene in Brooklyn that showed me so many more ways to be than I had ever known. I moved there from Massachusetts, leaving behind scalpels and skinned horses dangling from warehouse ceilings at a veterinarian school, coming to red-end cabaret nights and play parties and a brief stint as a drag king. With a new world wrapping around me, the discomfort that had been spreading sour and wrong through my body for ages finally had a name: gender dysphoria. It came with a sort of relief. I knew what it was. I knew what I could do about it. My best friend Rachel flew up to New York for the hysterectomy. After the excision, she unfolded a cot in my hospital room while I ordered waffles for room service. When the nurses came in, they tried to get me to stand up, but the pain was a riptide dragging me under. I swayed, nearly collapsing, so they eased me back into bed and up to my pain meds. I caught my breath as Rachel and I exchanged alarmed looks, her hand warm around mine. I didn't think it would be this bad, I managed to say. Me either, she replied. The nurse gave us a brief but incredulous look. You got an entire organ removed from your body, she pointed out. It's kind of a major surgery. I made it out of bed a few hours later, walking in slow motion around the hospital floor with my IV stand rolled beside me, my palms scraping against the walls and the nurse at my elbow. The next day, Rachel drove me home to my attic apartment. Most of my early recovery was spent there in a wingback recliner, the color of wet moss. It had a wooden handle on the side that opened the back hinge and made the foothold pop up with a creaky jerk stretching the chair out. I slept in it for a week because I had difficulty standing up or bending into narrow angles, and my bed was too close to the floor. I was full of stitches and hydrocodone, and my guts had been rearranged. It wasn't my first mutilation, but it was one of my best. An OGBANJE is an Igbo spirit that's born into a human body, a kind of malevolent trickster whose goal is to torment the human mother by dying unexpectedly, only to return in the next child and to do it all over again. They come and go. They are never really here. If you are a thing that was born to die, you are a dead thing, even while you live. Igbo ontology explains that everyone is in the cycle of reincarnation anyway. You are your ancestor. You will become an ancestor. The loop will keep looping with the lineage. OGBANJE, however, are intruders in this cycle, unwelcome deviations. They do not come from the lineage, they come from nowhere. As such, it's important for an OGBANJE never to reproduce. If it did, it would contribute to the lineage, and when it died, its spirit would join those of the humans participating in their reincarnation loop. Removing a uterus is an efficient way to make sure this never happens. While my gender had asserted itself in different ways since my childhood, one of its strongest features was always a violent aversion towards reproduction, towards having a body that was marked by its reproductive potential, a uterus to carry children, full breasts to feed them with. My first surgery was an outpatient procedure 2 years after I moved to Brooklyn, a breast reduction, some fat removed from my chest, some glands, some skin, nothing more. It required a letter from my therapist to prove that I was sane. I've never heard of anyone like this, the surgeon told me. He was an old white man who had performed many surgeries on trans patients, from breast augmentations to double mastectomies. Male to female, female to male, fine. But this in-between thing? I ground my teeth into a smile and handed him my letter along with the printed images of the chest I wanted. It was one that felt right for me, one that wouldn't move much, wouldn't sway with pendulous wrongness, or leave me gasping shallow breaths because my ribs were encased in the flattening black of a chest binder every day. I paid his office $10,000, skimmed from my student loans, and tried not to be angry at the hoops I had to jump through. If I had asked for an augmentation, it would have been fine, but wanting smaller breasts in the absence of back pain was considered ridiculous enough to require a therapist's approval. During my post-op visit, the surgeon complained that he'd never had to spend as much time in consultation with the patient as he had with me. We'd spent maybe 30 minutes together over a few appointments. My scars hypertrophied, leaving shiny brown keloids and flat, glossy rivers on my chest. Sometimes, when I felt like I wasn't trans enough, I'd look at them to remind myself that I had chosen to modify my body. Even though dysphoria and surgery aren't prerequisites for being trans, the scars will serve as a grounding reflection of my own certainty. I wasn't sure then what I was transitioning my body to, but I was clear that the gender I'd been raised as was inaccurate. I'd never be a woman. After that first surgery, my depression lifted significantly. It was a connection I hadn't made before how my dysphoria was affecting my mental health. The suicide attempt I had survived just 4 months before the surgery. The choice to finally modify my body felt like a big deal, in large part because other people treated it that way. Their alarm was almost infectious, but I was the one who had to live in this body. I was the one who suffered in it. The reduction was simply a necessary procedure, something that helped pull away from the wanting to die, something that made living a little easier. Still, there was a deep sense of transgression about what I was doing, and I couldn't shake it, especially as a Nigerian. It was too easy to tune into our communities and hear the voices heavy with disgust, saying that what I had done was disfiguring, that God had made me one way for a reason, that I had no right to say or do otherwise, that I was mutilating myself. There was an ideal my body was supposed to conform to, and I was deviating from it by having surgery. I was rejecting it as a center and choosing something else, a world where the deviation itself was the ideal. I chose it readily. I've never minded being a mutilated thing. If OGBANJE represent an overlapping of realities, a spirit who looks incredibly convincing as a human, then what does it look like for one to experience gender dysphoria and take surgical steps to resolve that? Our language around gender identity is often so Western. How do we intersect that with the non-Western realities? For example, is there a term for the dysphoria experienced by spirits who find themselves embodied in human form? It was inevitable that I would be drawn to these overlaps since I live there, inhabiting simultaneous realities that are usually considered mutually exclusive. The possibility that I was an OGBANJE occurred to me around the same time. I realized I was trans, but it took me a while to collide the two worlds. I suppressed the former for a few years because most of my education had been in the sciences and all of it was westernized. It was difficult for me to consider an Igbo spiritual world equally, if not more valid. The legacy of colonialism had always taught us that such a world wasn't real, that it was nothing but juju and superstition. When I finally accepted its validity, I revisited what that could mean for my gender. Did OGBANJE even have a gender to begin with? Gender is, after all, such a human thing. However, being trans meant being any gender different from the one assigned to you at birth. Whether OGBANJE are a gender themselves or whether gender didn't really matter, it still counts as a distinct category. So maybe my transition wasn't located within human categories at all. Instead, the surgeries were a bridge across realities, a movement from being assigned female to assigning myself as OGBANJE, a spirit, customizing its vessel to reflect its nature. It is considerably difficult to convince a doctor to remove an uninjured organ, even if your wholeness depends on its absence, especially if that organ is a reproductive one and they think you're a woman. I didn't have a letter for my uterus. It was too difficult to find a therapist who had experience with non-binary trans patients, and I didn't have any money. But I thought perhaps I could save up for it one day, so I made an appointment with a few gynecologists to discuss my options. I chose not to disclose my gender or lack thereof, but instead express my desire for the surgery as an elective choice, only because I didn't want to have children. The doctor received me with resistance and thin contempt. She describes the removal of her uterus, and I'm going to jump to the end. There's a vivid history of mutilation with the OGBANJE. A dead one can be cut, scarred to prevent it from returning undetected. OGBANJE are also a cohort. They separate from each other when they get born, but they return to the cohort when they die. I like to think that there is a form of shared or generational memory within that. Being dead or mutilated are not unfamiliar things to any of us. We're not afraid of either. It has been grueling to remake myself each time I learn more about who or what I am, to take the steps that such remaking requires, to bear the costs. Sometimes those costs are worn on your heart, like when people you love no longer have space in their worldview for you. Other times it's the body that bears them, in markings and modifications. By now I've come to think of mutilation as a shift from wrongness to alignment, and of scars as a form of adornment that celebrate this shift. The keloids on my chest and the small lines spilling out of my navel function as reminders that even when it meant stepping out to one reality to be swallowed by another, I kept choosing to move towards myself. With that, I would now like to read what this author wrote in this children's book for our middle school students. There shouldn't be any monsters left in Lucille. The city used to have them. Of course, what city didn't? They used to be everywhere, thick in the air, in offices, in the streets, and in people's homes. They used to be the police, and teachers, and judges, and even the mayor. Yeah, the mayor used to be a monster. Lucille has a different mayor now. This mayor's an angel. The last couple of mayors have all been angels. Not like a from heaven, not quite real type of angel, but a from behind and inside and in front of the revolution, therefore a very real type of angel. It was the angels who took apart the prisons and the police, who held councils prosecuting the former officers who'd shot children and murdered people, sentencing them to restitution and rehabilitation. Many people thought it wasn't enough, but the angels were only human, and it's hard to build a new world without making people angry. You try your best, you move with compassion, you think about the big structures. No revolution is perfect. In the meantime, the angels banned firearms, not just because of the school shootings, but also because of the kids who shot themselves and their families at home. The civilians who thought that they could shoot people who didn't look like them, just because they got mad or scared or whatever, and nothing would happen to them because the old law liked them better than the dead. The angels took the laws and changed them, tore down those horrible statues of rich men who owned people and fought to keep owning people. The angels believed and the people agreed that there was a good amount of proper and deserved shame in history, and some things were just never going to be things to be proud of. Instead, they put up other monuments. Some were statues of the dead, mostly the children whose hashtags had been turned into battle cries during the revolution. Others were giant sculptures with thousands of names carved into them because too many people had died, and if you made statues of everyone, Lucille would be filled with stone figures and there'd be no room for the alive ones. The names were of people who died when the hurricanes hit and the monsters wouldn't evacuate the prisons or send aid. People who died when the monsters sent drones and bombs to their countries because, as the angels pointed out, you shouldn't use a nation as a basis to choose which deaths you mourn. Nations aren't even real. People who died because of the monsters took away their healthcare names and names of people and people, countless letters recording that they had been. The citizens of Lucille put dozens of white candles at the base of each monument, hung layers of marigold necklaces around the necks of the statues, and when they walked past, would often fall silent for a moment and press a palm against the stone, soaking up the heat of the sun had left in it, remembering the souls the stone was holding. They'd remember the marches and vigils, the shaky footage that was splashed everywhere of their deaths, a thing that wasn't allowed anymore, that gruesome dissemination of someone's child gasping in their final moments, bubbling air or blood or grief. The angels respected the dead and their loved ones. The people of Lucille would remember the temples that were bombed, the mosques, the acid attacks, the synagogues. Remembering was important. Jam was born after the monsters, born and raised in Lucille, but like everyone else, she remembered. It was taught in school how the monsters had maintained power for such a long time, how the angels had removed them, making Lucille what it is today. It wasn't like the angels wanted to be painted as heroes, but the teachers wanted the kids to want to be angels, you see. Angels could change the world, and Lucille was proof. Jam was fascinated by them, by the stories the teachers told in history class. They briefly mentioned other angels, those who weren't human, but only to say that Lucille's angels had been named after these other ones. When Jam asked for more information, her teachers' eyes slid away. They mentioned religious books, but with reluctance, not wanting to influence the children. Religion had caused so many problems before the revolution. People were hesitant to talk about it now. If you really want to know, one of the teachers added, taking pity on Jam's frustrated curiosity, there's always the library. Why can't they just tell me, Jam complained to her best friend, Redemption, as they left the school. Her hands were a blur as she signed, and Redemption smiled at her annoyance. It was the last day of classes before the summer break. While he was excited to do nothing for the next several weeks except train, Jam was always on some hunt for information. You're giving yourself homework, he pointed out. Aren't you curious, she replied, who the old angels were, if they weren't human? If they weren't even real, you mean? Redemption adjusted the strap of his backpack. You know, that's what a lot of religion was, right? Just made up things used to scare people so they could control us better. Jam frowned. Maybe, she said, but I still want to know. That was pages 1 to 4. I'd like to share 2 more pages from the text. 78 to 80. It had taken the angels a long time to get rid of that kind of dangerous in Lucille. It was a fight that had started decades before even Bitter was born. The revolution had been slow and ponderous, but it had weight, and that weight built up a momentum. And when that momentum finally broke forth, it was with a great and accumulated force. This force washed out the monsters who worked in public spaces, allegedly for the public, but it carried farther into the homes and schools. It touched everyone. It made change. People started by believing the victims, and once this was apparent, it was safe to report monsters now. More and more people did so. The monsters always tried to apologize when they were caught, using the same slippery words that had worked for them before. They thought it would be enough that some time would pass and they would be welcomed back as if nothing had happened. They were wrong. There was no twisting away from the repercussions that the angels brought, justice rising like a sun over the hill in a loud morning. There had been so much counseling, so much treatment programs, so much rehabilitation to be done, so many amends to be made, the makings of how different justice could look. It was no small thing to try to restructure society, to find the pus boiling away under the scabs, to peel back the hardened flesh, to let it out. Jam had heard stories of how horrifying it had been to see the truth of how many monsters there were in Lucille, the public ones, the private ones, the chameleons, the freestyle solitary ones, the charismatic smiling ones. There were so many challenges, like how finding them was one thing, but keeping more from forming was another, like how the work of addressing the wounds they had caused never seemed to end. Bitter had told Jam a little about it, but only a little. The story seemed to scald her mouth. You can't know how happy your father and I were, she said to Jam, to bring you into a life where you have to go through things like that. Jam had thought herself lucky then, and maybe she's still lucky now, but lucky meant very little when there was a chance that a monster had slipped through the cracks, or that one had formed despite all their dismantling the angels had done. They'd done their best to tear apart entire structures, things that made monsters. We must kill the structures all the way to their roots, the angels had said, and only then will Lucille be safe. This is the book we're evaluating today.
May I proceed, Dr. Jackson? Yes.
Are you done?
Okay.
Thank you. Yes, you may.
Okay. You can go ahead and start my time, please.
I do have my presentation still, but she does her comments first, correct?
Opening statement.
Yes.
That's the way we've done it each week. Yep. Most of what Crystal Marule just said had nothing to do with this book. The fact of whatever the author went through in terms of a transition is not explained in this book. It's not discussed in this book. All of that, I'm not sure why it was said other than to try to infer that since that is an ideology or a belief that Marul does not accept, it's somehow bad. So I think you can ignore most of that. I'm only going to speak briefly on two other points before I talk about the book. She complains that her right to speak was taken away, as if we purposefully required and made some kind of audio problem last week. We don't have that kind of ability, and we did not do that. But her inference is that we somehow took away her right to speak. But it also took away my right to speak, because I spoke last week on why she was not permitted to call witnesses anymore. And so now I will take this opportunity to say it again so the record is clear. The witnesses were removed. We removed witnesses from the district after a hearing that occurred on January 23rd, 2024. It was on the book Melissa. Melissa had been reviewed at Terwilliger Elementary School, and one of the persons that reviewed it was a young man named Garrett Jones, who was the vice principal, assistant principal. The book Melissa is about a little transgender girl who's in the 4th grade and has an older brother who is a freshman in high school, and the older brother thinks that she's a little boy. And so what she does to hide is lock herself in the bathroom and read magazines that were designed for little girls. And one day the brother comes up and starts pounding on the door and says, "I know you're in there reading dirty magazines." Now, the words dirty magazines were said in that portion of the book twice, because she said, "I know what dirty magazines are, and this is not one of them." But there's nothing to describe or depict anything that might occur in a dirty magazine in the book. Then, maybe 100 pages later, after she's come out to her mom, and her mom has the magazines in the mom's purse, the brother looks in the mom's purse and sees the magazines and says, "Oh, I know you weren't reading porn." That's the only place the word porn is used in the book. And yet, when Garrett Jones was on the stand, Marul asked him the following questions. After discussing the book a little bit, she says, "So you think it's okay or acceptable to read books that reference dirty magazines and porn?" And there were references to the words dirty magazines and porn. So Mr. Jones said yes. Then she said, "What grade level?" And he said 3rd through 5th. Then she said, "Well, what age would that be?" And he said 8 through 11, 12. And then her next question was, "So you think it's okay for 8-year-olds to read about porn and dirty magazines?" And he said yes, thinking he was talking about this book. That particular 12 or so seconds was excised by someone out of a 2-hour hearing and posted on TikTok, making national news as if the school district of Alachua County was acceptable for them to have 8-year-olds reading about pornography and dirty magazines. We were able to fix up the damage, but at that point, because of that, and we believe that Marul knew something about that being posted, because the night before it appeared, she called Garrett Jones' wife, who she knows from church, and warned her about it. But the upshot was that Garrett Jones and his family sustained threats, including death threats, and the concern about the safety of the employees of this district is paramount to any policy that might affect the ability to call witnesses. So we informed her on April 2nd by letter that we were going to be changing the policy, that no witnesses would be called. We reminded her of the policies on threatening behavior or intimidation of staff members, and the well-being is paramount to anything about calling witnesses. Plus, ironically, we have the handwritten evaluations by Mr. Jones and every other witness already in evidence before the court. So you've got the testimony. So Dr. Marul understood this, and yet now we are depriving her of the ability to call witnesses. I would suggest that her behavior and the behavior of others that were put in motion is what deprived that opportunity. Now, very briefly, book Pet. It's not about Marxist ideology or anything else. It's a fantasy novel. It's about a teenage girl, Jam, who does happen to be transgender, but it's not about that fact. She lives in a place where all the evils in the world, all of the monsters, have been eliminated by the good guys, the angels. The people in town who defeated the monsters were the angels. One day, Jan was in her mom's painting studio, and she tripped and fell into a canvas her mother was working on that contained some embedded sharp objects, and she cut her hand. And her hand bled onto the painting, and all of a sudden, out of that came a very hot, big creature whose name was Pet. And Pet tells Jam, I am here to hunt a monster in this town. Even though all the monsters were supposed to be gone, there is a monster, and the monster lives in the house of your best friend, Redemption. So the book then goes into a series of circumstances where Jet, Pet, and Redemption embark on a journey to find the monster. They find a pamphlet on child abuse. They talk to Redemption's little brother, Moss. And all of a sudden, over a period of reading, the monster turns out to be Redemption's uncle, Hibiscus. The evil done by the monster was to sexually abuse Redemption's brother, Moss. But ironically, there is no depiction or description of any sexual act in the book. The story is about things that were not seen, but nevertheless were there. It is a cautionary tale. You cannot always tell who the monsters are. This also is about bringing the monster It happens to us all. It's about bringing the monster to justice. The book was a finalist for the 2019 National Book Award, also for young adult literature. It won the Stonewall Award for children's and young adult literature. So what is wrong with the book? According to Marul, blatant political and Marxist approach to society with chilling echoes of Mao's Cultural Revolution. I didn't get any of those echoes when I was reading the book. I'm not sure what she really means by this, but if it's to suggest that the society in this book was akin to Mao's Cultural Revolution, this book works just the opposite. It makes clear that attempts to cure all evils and to conform all persons does not work. If anything, a young reader who happens to know at the sixth or seventh grade level what happened in China during the Cultural Revolution well before his parents were perhaps born should read this book and know that that was nothing positive, because there's nothing positive about this utopian quote-unquote society as expressed in the book. But moreover, the differences in politics and political expression is not one of the reasons to take a book off the shelf in Florida. There is no pornography in the book. Marul says there is inappropriate depiction and description of sexual conduct as also prohibited, but there's not any one specific depiction or description of that conduct. The portion of the statute that prohibits depiction and description also has a caveat that in certain circumstances, children can be informed about child abuse. And if anything, without any description of a specific sexual act, this book results in a confession of Hibiscus that he did something bad to Moss, but it does not say what it was or describe it even more. Marul lists specific pages where she finds objectionable content, and we will present evidence that on each of those pages she is just incorrect. She also complains that the book contains child abuse, pedophilia, sexual abuse, and violence. I Googled those words asking, are those trigger words in Pet and Emenzi? Trigger words are now words used by certain groups to describe what's wrong with the book, a trigger word. And I found a website that had those words. When I put the words trigger words, Pet, and Emenzi, that's the author's name, it came up with the words child abuse, pedophilia, sexual abuse, and violence in that same order. It also appears to be an objectionable book in a conservative website called Book Looks, which tells parents what books to object to and why. In fact, every book that we've been here now for this is our 6th hearing. A is for Activist, Melissa, It Feels Good to Be Yourself, My Maddie, and When Aiden Becomes a Brother are all books that are in Book Looks. The district's position is clear. This book is available at High Springs Community School. It's only limited to 6th and 8th through 8th graders. It is in a library, but no 5th graders or below can get to that, is allowed to check that book out. It is only a library book. It is not instructional material. Library books are optional reading, not required reading. But, and this is my familiar refrain, any library book that encourages a child to read and think is beneficial to that child's education. This book is about justice for monsters who abuse children, and about how things are not always what they seem. We believe it should, our recommendation to the hearing officers after hearing all of the evidence to keep this book on the shelf at High Springs for grades 6 and above. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Maru, your witnesses.
Okay, sometimes I just get so blown away because Ms. Siegel makes the argument for me. It's mind-boggling to argue, going back to Melissa, that books referencing pornography and dirty magazines is appropriate in the K-5 environment, and admits that in fact it has it. And now she laid out almost my whole argument for PET. Yes, it's completely inappropriate. It touches on topics of child abuse and sexual abuse and things that we should not be putting in the minds of 11-year-olds. The fact that there's a resource called Book Looks that helps parents find the content of problematic texts is a good thing. It's something that the school district should refer to as they're encouraged to look at crowdsourced reviews of books as they select books. So I'm glad she's aware of the resource. I recommend her consulting it more often. Also, the Stonewall Award, I may point out, is an award for LGBTQ books. And if you don't know the history of Stonewall, I don't have time to do that one, but there is a book about Stonewall in the library, so maybe I will challenge it, so I'll have the opportunity to share it with you. But nonetheless, that there's even a Stonewall Award for children's literature is just repulsive. The fact that she says that there's no echoes of Mao's cultural revolution or Marxism is beyond naive. I cannot believe that an educated lawyer can make those claims, and I will give her the benefit of the doubt that it's out of naivety and ignorance. But I'm here to share with you some of those references, so beyond the shadow of a doubt, if any reasonable person with critical thinking skills can see that this entire text is foregrounded in the revolutionary terminology used by Marx and Mao. Again, the book is currently set in multiple middle schools, which means it's available to children as young as 11, although the indicated grade on their own review form is for 7th to 10th, so it's being exposed to children a year younger than what's even indicated. Just to highlight some of the summaries, Ms. Siegel pointed out just fine about Jam meets Pet, a creature that emerges from the colors of her mother's art after she loses a drop of blood on the painting. So we have a blood offering to call up an evil spirit. It's a creature made of horns and colors and claws who emerges from her mother's painting at the drop of blood. And Emenzi deftly wields the stylistic elements of magical realism to shine light on the horrors of child abuse. This is not a science fiction text. This is an allegory. This is a story, poem, or picture that can be interpreted to reveal a hidden meaning, and it's not so hidden in this book, typically a moral or political one. This book is not science fiction. It's an allegory cloaked in religiosity and ideology. Let me just point to some of the religious references. We have the character's name, Bitter, which brings up the names of Mara, the mother of Ruth in the Bible, redemption, Malachite, beloved, blessing, this virtue. We have spiritual references such as angels, demons, blood sacrifices. We have a perversion of biblical texts, a reference to the angels in Ezekiel, armored faces that weren't faces, wings full of mouths, wheels of reddened eyes, four-headed forms that weren't even vaguely human. This was a butchered lion head bleeding somewhere in there. Quotes such as, "Do not be afraid." "Maybe you can pull the stone out of the pool and put the moon back together," a reference to the Quran. The religious themes of justice and cleansing, playing music such as ragas, an Indian array of melodic structures with musical motifs that have the ability to color the mind. And the most impactful statement would be page 102, which says, "All knowledge is good knowledge," a statement that was just echoed by Ms. Siegel herself. There's a warning in the book of Genesis about eating from the tree of good and evil. At your own risk do you defy that wisdom. Then you have the librarian that's set up as the cathedral. It describes it in vocabulary that emanates from a cathedral with pitched roofs and these large windows. And Ube, the librarian, who in the revolution was an Asada leader, I don't have time to go into who Asada is, but Google it. And then he says, "Now I want you all to know that y'all's parents may not be too hot about me showing these to you," talking about these pamphlets about sexual abuse, "being as you mad young and whatnot. But all this was material suitable for kids your age back then, feel me? And if you come here looking for information, I'ma give it to you. That's what I do. Ain't no grown-up in the whole of Lucille grown up enough to tell you you don't deserve answers to your questions. You understand?" I'm assuming that this is Miss Siegel's favorite character in the book. Pet, the demon, affirms and says, "I like this human." The librarian here, without parental approval, is giving kids pamphlets about parental neglect, physical abuse, emotional abuse, child abuse, and sexual abuse. Let's talk about Pet, the painting. The painting had hind legs of a goat. The figure's head was heavy with curled ram's horn. It was embedded with razor blades on which Jam cut her finger. It's a satyr. A satyr from Greek mythology is most often represented with the legs and horns of goats. They're also frequently shown masturbating or copulating with animals and engaging in orgies or standing by and watching. According to the Merriam-Webster dictionary, a satyr is a sylvan deity in Greek mythology having certain characteristics of a horse or goat and fond of Dionysian revelry. The blood calling. She threw her hands to break the fall. There were drops of her blood on the figure's chest where she'd fallen. "It's how it does happen," Bitter murmured. Blood calling. The cult of Dionysus is also a cult of the souls. His maenads feed the dead through blood offerings, and he acts as a divine communicant between the living and the dead. He is sometimes categorized as a dying and rising god. This is not coincidental that this was the selection for the demon in this novel, knowing the background of the author. She had learned how to call up the demon from her mother, who had done it in the previous text, cutting her thumb, dripping it on her painting, and calling out the demon. "Come out, nah," she said in her head. "Come out and play." "Welcome," she said when she came out. I Googled more about satyrs to find out what their relationship was with the Stonewall and the queer community. And I don't have time to go into it all, but I'm just flabbergasted that we think that this is appropriate to be put into children's literature. We have the Satyrs Motorcycle Club, which is one of the oldest LGBTQ motorcycle clubs, also with communist roots. You have books such as The Satyr's Kiss, Queer Men, Sex, Magic, and Modern Witchcraft. And then in this blog that I found somebody talking about role-playing, they say a rare character with both satyr blood, gender shift, may have a very unstable sexual identity, blah, 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 blah. They might wish to do some further reading on child sexuality. What? This is a symbolism that we want to wrap into this Marxist demon ideology. I don't even know what you call it at this point. Turning to these Marxist and Maoist references, if you weren't able to recognize them yourself, I will help you point them out. We have themes of the oppressor and the oppressed. Quote, "So the obvious monsters would have been like the police and the billionaires." We have the multiple references to revolution. We have the opiate of the masses. Religion had caused so many problems before the revolution. You know what religion was, right? Just made up things used to scare people. We have the ends justify the means. Unpleasant things must be done for unpleasant purposes out of unpleasant necessity. We have clear references to Mao. There was no twisting away from the repercussions that the angels brought. Justice rising like a sun over the hill in a loud mourning. If you do not see these references, you need to do some more reading. Critical consciousness and organize, agitate, educate by Lenin. She had been part of the Asada, the young rebel behind more of the protests and direct action. Asada, actually I have it here for you. Asada Olugbala Shakur is an American political activist and convicted murderer who was a member of the Black Liberation Army. We have struggle sessions and shaming. Are you not ashamed? Are you not full of shame? See how shameful you shamelessly shout about me being here, not once thinking if your child was safe without noticing her. You shame things. Where are your eyes? They are not clouded by shame, but maybe they should be, page 47. The references to the Red Guard party over the family. If she split from her parents, Pet was here for a reason. It was a simple choice. Her parents floated away. Jam chooses Pet over her parents. Adults wanted the young people to be the ones saving the world. The re-education camps or gulag references. We close them up, you hear? We lock them away. Aloe, we've talked about this, Bitter interjected. Rehab centers are not the same as prisons. That's exactly what Mal would have said. Then we have Jam sighed and freed her hands from her mother's so she could say the words lifted from an old Gwendolyn Brooks poem, words the angels had used when they gave Lucille back to itself. A revolution cry, quote, we are each other's harvest. We are each other's business. We are each other's magnitude and bond. Gwendolyn Brooks is a poet and a radical left activist in the Black Power movement in the 60s, and she wrote this poem celebrating Paul Robeson, a Black radical communist. Quote, there was a time when she would sit by Jam's bed and read her N.K. Jemisin books. N.K. Jemisin is another Marxist. Systems of power stalk Jemison's protagonists, often embodied as gods and primeval forces. When escape comes in her novels, it's not a merely personal victory. Her heroes are smashing through oppressive systems and leaving them behind like shed skins. Then there's the references to rage. Perhaps you should read 1984 and his 2 Minutes of Hate, which of course the demon Pet loved and reveled in the rage of his character. There's the conversation, what do we do when we find them? We remove them, Pet said. That's my job. Remove them? You mean kill them? Pet tilted its head, pleased in amusement, and made a chattering sound. Yes. Then we have the numerous references to sexual assault and rape. It had hurt her too much to be alive then, hurt her even more to give birth to Jam's mother, whose existence was the result of a monster's monstering. This grandmother had died soon after the birth, but not before naming Jam's mother Bitter. No one had argued with the dying woman. This is a clear reference to rape. She knew about her grandfather, the monster that caught her grandmother. If there was anyone who knew what a monster was or was not, it would be Bitter, the daughter of one. And then the reference to sexual assault, what people used to do to girls like her on page 20. Child sexual abuse. He didn't want to help me with his bath. He didn't want me to help him with his baths anymore. He was fine with baths before, fine one day, freaked out the next, full-on tantrum. My dad came in and couldn't calm him down. He wouldn't talk about it, not even to her. We thought he was just tired and wanted more attention from her. He's like that sometimes. We didn't think it was anything. I guess I thought something was wrong deep down, I just didn't know what. And some of the things in the pamphlets about sexual abuse that the librarian gave to her, some of the things Moss had been saying. I know her parents have been worried too. None of us knew how to put it together. Moss was so little. He's only 7, Jam. I mean, this makes me want to cry, that you think this is okay, and that you think this is okay for 11-year-olds to read about. Where is your criteria? That was in the basement. Yeah, but it's soundproof, remember? For a sickening moment, Jam wondered if hibiscus had ever taken Moss down there. Tell me, how long have you been hurting my brother? He hurt Moss. Why are you defending him? Now there's a child who's been hurt, and I come with justice, and you want me to stay my judgment in the name of chance? I will cleanse, and we will cleanse again. When that child asks, what happened to the man who did this to me? There will be a righteous answer, and he will have been carried out by my righteous hand, and he will at least know that he had justice. He had justice, and the due was won. Talk about red flags. I could go on. I mean, I won't go on. You've read the book. Then you have the references to the transgender ideology. He declared his trans identity at 3. He was put on puberty blockers at 10. At 13, given cross-sex hormones, which is permanent sterilization, with an estrogen plant in his arm. 15, he had bottom surgery. He was physically castrated. Then there's topics of polyamory. His mother, Malachite. His father, Beloved. Redemption's third parent. What the heck? Third parents? We're not talking about a step-parent. This is a polyamorous parenting. Then we have non-binary. But demonic non-binaries. Am I a terrible person, she asked Pet. There's no such thing, it replied. There's only what you do. You humans and your binaries, Pet said, coming from a demon. Yeah, the reference to mental disorders, I didn't even know where to put this, but you got Coro, a multi-tiered disease presenting as an overwhelming belief that one's sex organs are shrinking into their body. She began to dissociate, reality loosening around her like a hammock, deconstructing itself. And then there's this weird age confusion going on in the book. Jam is supposedly 16, yet her mother tucks her into bed. Pet calls her little girl. Page 22, her mom kneels and slides her arms under the girl, lifting her up. Jam's head fell against her mother's shoulder and bitter carried her to bed. 16? What? Then we got the author herself at the end. She writes, I want Pet to reach as many readers as non-humanly possible so it can do the work. Everybody knows that phrase, do the work. It's meant to do in the world. We are each other, she says. And then in the description of the author, she says that she lives in liminal spaces. Quickly, I'm going to summarize this in 5 minutes so my witness has all the time he wants. I just want to talk about how this violates so many ground rules of selection for books. It violates our rules about how sex is defined, the pronouns of use, sexual orientation, and gender identity not being instructed in K-8. Slide 11 of the selection criteria training says you need to consider the degree to which the material will be supplemented or explained by classroom instruction. Unless they're teaching the horrors of communism, I sure hope this book's not being taught into a class. The educational purpose, God help us. And what priority? With priority given to materials aligned to state standards. Well, this does not align to state standards. It undermines them all. And then without bias or indoctrination, it is cloaked in indoctrination. Slide 31, all materials in a public school, whether found in a library and so forth, need to avoid using any unsolicited theories or strategies that may lead to student indoctrination. They also must take into consideration the educational purposes. Additionally, the materials must be free of pornography and free of materials prohibited under 847.01219. Sexual conduct. It should not include any references to sexual conduct, meaning actual or simulated sexual intercourse, deviant sexual intercourse, sexual bestiality, masturbation, or sadomasochistic abuse. If it wasn't sadomasochistic, what happened to that poor little child, I don't know what it is. Or any conduct, or any act or conduct which constitutes sexual battery. It's clearly in this book. In sum, when you evaluate, and I'm not going to go over this rubric because it seems to not make any point to you, but it's very clear to anyone who applies any kind of unbiased evaluation that this book does describe conduct which constitutes sexual battery, so it shouldn't be appropriate. This book is not suited to our students' needs. It's not appropriate for the age or grade level. Gender ideology is prohibited in the K-8 environment. Peer reviews indicate that this book promotes harmful ideas, so it is not suited to their ability to comprehend the material. I think Vasily even pointed out that most kids wouldn't even know who Mao is, which is sad. Circulation data suggests minimal reader interest. Content is in direct opposition. Standards that could be supported perhaps by literacy itself could definitely be supported by the books that are not in our library, that should be in our library and have been recommended by the state, and there's hundreds of them. All in all, when you apply the numerous guidelines and criteria, this text fails to meet the threshold of appropriateness for the 6 to 8 environment, and it should be removed. Can you stop my time, please?
Thank you. Attorney Seeger, do you need to cross-examine? Oh, you have, I'm sorry. Yes, we could take a 5-minute recess, please. It's not. Thank you. Dr. Moreau, you can continue.
Okay, I would like to call my witness, Mr. Senator Perry. Mr. Perry? Mr. Perry, they want you to sit up on the dais. Sorry, Mr. Perry. I just want to thank you so much for coming today and providing your testimony. If you wouldn't mind just stating for the record your name and title.
My name is Keith Perry. I'm the senator of this district.
Ma'am, there's a lot of talking from the crowd. Could we? Okay, thank you. I have some questions for you, but maybe before I start asking them, I would just like maybe your reflections of what's been going on, if you have any thoughts you want to share, and then I'll address some of my questions.
Sure, and I don't know if I could, Your Honor, not knowing the procedures and how they work, make sure on the rules. Would it be all right if so I understand it? How are this proceeding? How was it determined? Who made the policies? Who made the rules for this hearing? How was that formulated?
By the School Board of Alachua County.
The school members did that? Okay. When you have other issues that are related, like if my kid was going to school and there was a pedestrian safety issue in a parking lot, would this be the format that a parent would come to?
Dr. Jackson, I have to object. Senator Perry is here as a witness, not here as an inquisitor.
Well, you don't have to answer my questions.
I'm just suggesting that Dr. Barule's got 21 minutes left to go, and I will object to any questions, anything that you're requesting answers from us. If you'd like to do a public records request, we'll be happy to entertain it.
Can I ask a question on that? Why is it that I'm asking you a question and the attorney for the school board objects?
Because she's here to represent the side for the school board. I'm unbiased.
So you can answer a question if you have the answer or want to. You don't have to. I'm not telling you to answer.
The question I can answer is based on hearing.
Okay.
But otherwise, I would not be able to answer. But a hearing question, as I said.
Okay, but I can ask a question if you don't want to answer it or it's not appropriate. I do have a question for you, though. Why would the attorney for the school board object to me asking a question? Can you just simply say that's not appropriate or I don't want to answer it?
I don't know. I don't have an answer.
Do you have an answer why I can't ask a question?
Sir, you are here as a witness, not as an inquisitor. This is not a court proceeding per se, but if you're a witness, you're here because Dr. Marule believes you have information to provide the hearing officer that will be helpful in determining. And please take this off of my time. Do not take it off of Dr. Marule's time. But you're here as a witness. If this is not a judicial proceeding, but this is not a legislative proceeding either. So if you've got if Dr. Marule has a question for you that relates to the book that we're at an issue for, then you're certainly welcome to answer. But I will be requesting that the school board disregard anything that has to do with your questioning of us about procedure.
Okay, so it's not a judicial hearing. It's not a legislative hearing. What kind of hearing is this? And where are the rules?
It's quasi-judicial. If you would like to, after this hearing, I can present you with the policies of the school board in terms of hearing procedures, which are permitted by statute and by rule.
And you developed these rules?
No, sir, I don't develop the statutes. They're done
hearing-
up in that place where you work.
We developed the
Tallahassee.
hearing, how this is conducted, this.
The school board develops, okay,
Well,
let me
I'll
go
just
ahead and
stop.
take this off my time. The school board develops policies. The administration develops procedures because they're operational. The school district superintendent has no control over policy. The school board elected members do. No, you can stop it now.
Okay, then I will make a statement, if that's okay, and please, they're going to be rhetorical questions that you do not have to answer, and you can still object if you want to. As someone just watching some of these hearings on TV, as a parent, watching a parent present a case, I was curious as to if this kind of a hearing for a parent to have a concern, if a kid was being bullied in school, would we have an attorney for the school board want to object and counter everything that the parent was bringing up, the parent's concerns? If you, any other issue, would the school board have an attorney that would bring witnesses and counter things to that? Are these the standard policies, or is this a specific thing that the school board has said, we are going to take a parent who has an objection to a book and put her through a quasi-judicial hearing, which if the goal is to get to the truth and to the fact of a book that we're looking at, or is the goal of this hearing to prove the parent is wrong? I noticed in her opening statements, she talked about the author and the author's background, which was brought up by the school attorney, which said this is irrelevant. Whoever the author is totally irrelevant. Then she spent over 5 minutes really taking to task Ms. Marule about her issues and things that happened, and almost insinuating that things that happened to one of the witnesses was her doing. I don't understand that. I don't understand if the role of this hearing is to determine if a book is appropriate or not. And by the way, the word banning is an inappropriate and wrong use of our language to say we're banning a book. These books we have books that are appropriate for certain people. They just had a group that had a big thing on all the banned books. Well, and they're reading the books. If you had books in other countries that were banned, you wouldn't be reading them. They wouldn't be allowed. If these books are banned, they would not be allowed to read them. We're only talking about that. I just find this, I kind of ask myself after watching a couple of these hearings, asking myself, is there any parent watching this proceeding, this quasi-judicial hearing, and saying, wow, I think that makes me feel like I have a concern about, I'm a parent, I have a concern, I think I want to go down here and do this? Or is this quasi-judicial hearing simply to intimidate parents, not to bring their claims or their concerns to the school board and to this hearing? And I can, again, not as a state senator, this has nothing to do with this, as a parent in Alachua County watching these proceedings on TV, I don't think we're going to have many parents involved in any of these proceedings, and I think that's the opposite of what the school board probably wants. Again, I'll ask you a question, do we want parents involved in the proceedings, or do we want them to be intimidated by an attorney that's being paid to intimidate parents, not paid to investigate the book?
Mr. Perry, to accuse me of intimidating. That's absolutely inappropriate, ad hominem attack. Excuse me. You should know better than that. I would object to that.
Let me explain. These proceedings are in lieu of statutes that were set forth by Florida legislators to the school district, and the school district set policy based on the statute.
The laws that were passed by the Florida legislature and have been told by one school district, I think a librarian, that they were not going to abide by these. And of course, if you read Marxist books, you understand why they would say they weren't going to abide by laws instead of going out and changing those. But the laws that we passed did not intend to have it where a parent was put on trial. I can tell you that, and if you read the Florida statutes that we passed, it is not intended. It is intended for a parent to bring forward the issues and concerns, and for the school board. And if I look at the slides, you see what Mrs. Marule did was a very detailed breakdown of the book, whereas the lawyer just said this is not right. And so I think the law that we passed absolutely is not about putting a parent on trial.
Well, Senator, I have to say, as me, I'm just interpreting the policy set forth in procedure by the school board and the superintendent with his procedures for that policy. So in lieu of what we're having here today, if you have a concern, could I suggest that we take it up with the district office rather than here? Because nothing can be changed here at the hearing.
Right. I'm agreeing with you on that. You're in a position where you've been put in to be a mediator in this process, and I understand your role. I don't understand the school board's attorney's role and why, if it's not adversarial, then someone's not watching. But the role of there's nobody going to watch this on TV and watch the exchange that happened today and happened in previous and say, This is an adversarial position that the school board has put the parent in,
Well,
and that is not the intent of the law.
Then you have the respondent, you have the district, and you have the citizen that's bringing, so you got both sides that have an opinion for me to make a recommended
Okay.
order. So we have to have, and that superintendent has is staff attorney, and respondent, Ms. Dr. Marua has her, a friend, a retired lawyer with her. So it's not that we're trying to be adversarial,
But it
we're
is.
trying to balance it.
Well,
Okay.
but it is adversarial, and that question you bring up, why would a parent have to have either an attorney with them?
She doesn't, she just have a witness.
Okay. Why would why would the school board then have an attorney?
That's a
I get-
question that you're gonna have to ask the superintendent.
And is the superintendent the person, or is it the school board?
Well, school board sets policy, and from the policy, the superintendent, he implements procedures.
Well, this is what, and I've read this book, and I've looked at her information. I've heard the attorney say that this is not Marxist or the other things. The information that you have is pretty well documented. This book is not appropriate, and if you read the documentation, or you can listen to the generalization by the attorney that says this is appropriate. That's a general statement, whereas the facts bear out, and if we talk just specifically about this book, about the hearing, which again I think is very unfortunate for parents to have to go through this, and by the there's, I see one parent who's done this. I don't know any other parent in this district that would want to subject themselves to this, and even at the beginning, not to get too off track, but why would her personal information, the very first thing that she did, be released to the media and the press is another adversarial type of a thing. But dealing with this particular book and the laws that we passed, not dealing with the proceedings that are taking place, but you can see the data, you can see the points that took a lot of energy and time to go through this book and point this out. And if you study history and Mao and Marxist, and you understand the structure, the government, the family, laws, you understand revolution, then if you understand history, then you're going to understand that this book is clearly in the direction of Marxist and revolutionary history, that you do not change laws through elected officials, you change laws through revolution, and that's clear in the book. That's not debatable, and is a book that promotes all kind of other demonic things in the religious cult movement, but it also promotes revolutionists, not law-abiding people, who says, we have a system of government that if you want to change things, you elect people, you work hard to get them elected, and then you have them represent you in law. So the book on its face, not on its face, on its face maybe you can interpret it one way, but in detail, in the language of the book, it's clearly by the laws that we passed. Again, you can disagree with the law. You can say the law is bad, but when you start having people say that we're not going to abide by the law, that's a troubling road, and we're all not going to be happy with that direction that we go. So I'd be happy to, I don't know if you had any other specific questions.
Well, thank you. I have a few clarifying questions. Do you expect the district media specialist and the school media specialist who take the training to abide by the criteria in their training to select texts?
Yes.
Is there?
Abide by the law, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so would it be appropriate for a district media specialist to say, I will not consider that slide because I believe it is mistaken when I select books? Would it be appropriate for a district media specialist to say or answer no when asked if they will follow the criteria stipulated on slide 31, which is common selection criteria for instructional materials, library materials, and reading lists, and they say no, they won't follow those criteria?
For anybody in any authority to disregard any laws, rules, statutes would be inappropriate, and not only inappropriate, but very damaging to have a person in a government position helping educate our children saying that they will decide what laws they
I'm
will abide
constrained to
by.
object and move to strike. He doesn't have any idea, he is not given a proper hypothetical, and this is inappropriate testimony. We are
It's a
here to
hypothetical
deal
answer.
with, excuse me, sir. We are here to deal with the book Pet. We are not here to deal with the hearing process or the credibility of any of the employees of the district.
Well, then how come you had 5
Excuse me,
minutes?
sir.
How come you had 5 minutes
Excuse
to
me,
talk
sir.
about
This will
Excuse
come off
me.
of my time. Please add back a minute of her time or a minute and a half of her time. But it is absolutely inappropriate for this gentleman to come in here and try this procedure that we have been doing now for the 6th time. She happens to be the only parent that has objected. Nobody else has taken it this far. But it's absolutely inappropriate for him to denigrate the people of this, the citizens, the employees of the district based on her hypothetical, which is inappropriate. I'm going to ask the school board to disregard any statements by Mr. Perry, and that's all I'm going to say about that. You
Can I
stop
object to her objection? This is not a hypothetical. This
excuse
is
me.
documented in the record
Dr. Murrow,
from the Melissa
at the
hearing.
closing, you may have your closing statement.
I can't object to,
No, no, we're not
this is
objecting
in
to
the record.
You,
This is in
we
the
have a
record.
court recorder here, and all of this is, so it's there. So
I
if
know,
you
it's
want
there
to
from
have
the
it, put
hearing,
your
Melissa,
petition
which
in
she
to-
brought up. She brought up,
You can put your petition in to have it struck as well. But it's, at this point, it's not a debate. I'm supposed to be hearing information where I can make a,
but you were here for that hearing. You
Yes.
heard the district media specialist answer, no, she would not use those criteria to select
but
the
the
text on
miss,
slide
I don't
31.
recall that right now. She's not here to be a witness. You're asking me something to
Because
remember.
I'm not allowed to call her as a witness.
I understand.
She can't call her now.
Sir, you're not in this, Mr. Edwards. Now, you're not part of this. You're only there for her support. Okay, please, let's maintain civility. All right. Do you have
Okay, and
another
I have more,
question?
yes, I have more questions.
Okay.
And I'll answer, my answer is the same. On a hypothetical, if anybody that is in government that works for the school openly said they were not going to, this is hypothetical, said they are not going to abide by a law or a rule, they should not, that would be wrong.
Thank you for your answer.
What, sir, oftentimes it's been said by the staff attorney that any book that gets a child to read is a good book. In fact, she doubled down again, or tripled, or quadrupled down again on that today. And we've also had the district media specialist say that every book that's on our shelves deserves to stay on our shelves. What do you think of those mindsets for those who are supposed to be evaluating the criteria for book appropriateness?
Just note my objection to this continued line.
Yes, so
That was from today's hearing. She said it in her opening statement.
you're asking for opinion. We're trying to fact find. That's an opinion, Dr. Moreau, from the senator who is not a certified media specialist.
But I am.
Okay, but you're asking him for his opinion.
I'm asking his professional opinion. He was invited as my witness as a professional, and I believe when you've invited your professional opinions, they're allowed to give
You're
their professional
asking him
opinion.
about selection criteria for a book.
He passed this statute. His opinion is relevant, and I'd like to hear it.
The statute is clear. For
would like to
instructional
talk.
and library, they're both different.
I would like to say that we do have a law on the books that says certain books are not appropriate for certain age groups. And there's a proceeding, and if we said and they believed that there was no criteria, then we would not need to have this hearing, would not need to have any kind of laws in the books. But we do have laws in the books that specifically say there is certain material that is not appropriate for certain age groups. Again, it is not banning anything. What it is saying is that there is certain information that should not be disseminated to certain age groups because it is not appropriate. And to state that that is incorrect, that's an opinion, and anybody can have an opinion, but to state that publicly, to say that any book is appropriate, goes against Florida statute.
Thank you, sir. Also, on slide 38 of the media training, it states, parents that are challenging or objecting to materials should not have to prove that those materials are objectionable. Instead, the individuals that chose the materials must be prepared to defend the educational value of the materials if needs arise. Do you believe that is what is happening here today?
No, I think it is the opposite.
Again, note my objection.
I believe that is the opposite of what is happening here. And as the attorney mentioned, you're the only parent, and now you know why. This is not, you are on trial, and that is unfortunate, and I don't think that is certainly, I know that is not the intention of the Florida statutes.
Senator, that's an objection. She's not on trial. We have a hearing going. Do you have
I know
any questions?
I know the petitioner is on trial, which is not the way that the law was intended.
Petitioner is only to present her side, to sway an opinion.
But Florida statute does not say she has to present and defend her side. That's the Florida statute. It is the role of the school board to present why it should not be, not for her. That's the way the law is, and that's the way it is in judicial hearings, that you have to do that. So she asked me a question. We'll move on. I know you're running out of time.
Oh,
Yes, sir.
yes,
So I have another question. The district often brings up the fact that a parent can limit their child's access to any specific text by filling out a form. Do you believe that the parental restriction option is intended for books that don't meet the selection criteria? Or let me reword it. These books that obviously are inappropriate and don't meet the criteria, I am being told that I can individually, title by title, limit my child's access to them. And let me add to that. Furthermore, though, when I said, then please tell me all the books that have references to pornography and dirty magazines in the K-5 environment so I can restrict my child's access to them, they say, we're not able to do that level of query. Do you think it's appropriate, instead of deeming a book inappropriate, which it absolutely is, to say to the parent they need to find each inappropriate book and individually ban their child from having access to it?
Yeah, that is an impossible task to make a parent go through. And you had mentioned, and the attorney mentioned too, that there are websites that bring this out, and you would think that the school would use that website as a tool to do investigating, not to abide by it, but to use it as a tool to say, hey, they're doing our job for us to follow Florida statutes. It would be a great opportunity for them, but it is impossible to think that parents are going to be able to go through entire media libraries and instructional books and determine that would be an impossible task and would not be appropriate to put parents through that.
Do you think it would be an appropriate task for the staff to proactively seek and remove books that don't meet state criteria from the school library?
Absolutely, and they should be doing that according to Florida statutes, and they should be doing that for the parents.
And how would you expect professionalism to be demonstrated by staff when a faculty member, other staff, or parent identifies a book that may not meet criteria?
I'm sorry, repeat that?
What would you expect their professional demeanor to be like when a parent raises concern or a teacher raises concern about a text that may not meet the criteria? Should it be antagonistic, or should they be collaborative and grateful for them
Dr. Miro.
having that information brought to them?
No, Dr. Miro, that is an opinion you're asking for. We're trying to find fact on this.
I'm not quite sure how to word this appropriately because I'm not a lawyer. But my question is, how should the collaboration be between the school and a parent when a parent detects a questionable text? What should the professional response of the school be?
The professional response would be that of making sure that the parents' needs and the child's needs are taken care of, and that that the Florida statutes are followed. And so I would hope it would be and these are opinions, and I apologize, but you often hear about schools wanting parents to be involved in the process, and I think this process discourages parents from being involved in the process.
Dr. Miro,
Does the statute?
this is the fact-finding process here. You filled it out. We are following all the procedures that are outlined on the front page, which you're well aware of. Senator Perry does not have to give his opinion. It's here. The school board procedure was set by the superintendent. So let's ask questions on PET, please, so we can move forward. You have 4 minutes left for your
Well,
question.
my question is that when I initially raised my concern, it was sent to the media and I was doxxed. Then the district colluded with activists to publish clips about me on Twitter to defame my character. Then they used family relationships and friend relationships to get a meeting with me to report back to the district. That has been the behavior of the district to a parent who
Miro,
raised
that is
objections.
that's not in my domain. I have
But I'm
nothing-
asking the senator, my witness, his professional opinion, if the statute had taken into consideration that should be
But
the
that is
appropriate
not
reaction
why
of a
we're
school
here,
district.
Dr. Moreau, we're here for PET. The professional opinion for Senator Perry is about the novel PET.
Right.
We have 3
Sir,
minutes and 47 seconds for you to have your closing.
Sir, I would give you my time if you'd like to say anything else. If not, I do have a brief closing statement.
I would just, again, I started out with this whole process. I think the process is designed to intimidate parents and keep them out of the process, and that's the exact opposite of not only the statute, but it should be opposite of what the school board wants, which is wants parental involvement in this, not to intimidate. And there is nobody watching this, and people can agree or disagree on the book, but there's nobody watching this that doesn't say there's no way as a parent I'm going to go through this process. And I think that's a very unfortunate thing. That's not you, but that's them. That's the school board and these policies and this quasi-judicial thing that a parent has to go through. I think it's very unfortunate for parents to go through.
Thank you, sir.
Attorney Seeger, do you have any questions?
When we did away with witnesses, it was that she could present a witness. But we're about no cross-examination. So I have nothing to say other than I've already made my objections. So
Thank you,
he can be excused.
I guess with the remaining time, would you like me to move to my closing statement?
I think I'm allowed to make a presentation myself, aren't I?
Oh, yes, you are. I'm sorry.
Huh?
I had
But
left
she
the,
can let me make my presentation, then she makes her closing.
I mean, you never have in the past, so I didn't anticipate it, but go for it.
What we have done in the past is you have made your presentation, I have made my presentation, you have made your closing, I have made my closing. If you are requesting a change in procedure to make the closing now, I will agree. Go ahead and make the closing.
I'm not making any requests. I just wasn't anticipating you to give a
no,
presentation.
Dr.
but I
Murrow,
look forward to
I'm
it.
sorry. I was in error. You had your witness. I did not call for the,
This is fine. It's fine.
okay, and then you do your closing.
just didn't-
That was my error. Respond, your witness time.
Okay, I'm going to just make a brief presentation. We have presented a lot of evidence in the booklet that we've already given, and I will provide you with a couple of other things, but I do want to comment on the fact that the citizens' request form for reevaluation of library materials is a form that was provided to us by the state of Florida and was told to us by the state of Florida must be adhered to for any challenges to library materials. This is a challenge to library materials, not to instructional materials. And the book does require what the basis for the
I'm
objection.
sorry, just a protocol. She wasn't sworn in, so is this testimony or is this a closing statement?
Excuse me, she has no witnesses, so she's our only response.
Doesn't she have to be sworn in like I was?
No problem.
Go ahead, swear me in if that will make her happy.
Yeah, because we were not having any outside witness like you, Dr. Monroe. You wouldn't have to.
I just know that
sworn
you've
if
had
I
me
brought the
be
petition.
sworn in if I was going to present testimony like that.
Attorney,
I
so
swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
thank you.
I am referring to the state's request form, form number IM2S2324002, citizens request. The only places that objections for library materials is in section 3. The basis for the objection, the material is pornographic, the material is prohibited under section 847.012 Florida statutes, which describes sexual conduct and sexual description or depictions, or that it's not suited for the grade level or inappropriate for the grade level. It doesn't say anything about political ideology. It doesn't say anything about decisions about Marxist.
Am I allowed to object?
Excuse me.
No,
I'm not allowed to object?
right now. She's her witness.
Am I allowed to question
I'll let
afterwards?
you question the witness after
Thank you.
she's.
He can't
okay.
question. We're not doing cross-examination.
No cross-examination.
At any rate, the book itself, I'm going to provide you a copy of what is in our, can you do this? One for her and one for Marul. It's exhibit number 7B of our exhibits. It is a listing of the various peer reviews of this book that were used by the committee to evaluate this text. The book is described as a haunting work of speculative fiction. Speculative fiction is a relatively recent term of art that departs, a piece of fiction that departs from reality is fantastical, speculative, and futuristic, but it does not have a connection necessarily to reality. Some examples are Fahrenheit 451, Handmaid's Tale, some of the recent ones. This book is described as a thoughtful, indelible story about truth, justice, and remembering. It talks about forgetting is how the monsters come back. It's described as a soaring novel that shoots for the stars and explodes the sky in its bold brilliance. And it's described as a riveting and important read that could not be more well-timed to our society's struggles with its own monsters. Those are the opinions of some of the people that have evaluated this book. I will now hand you, or let me make sure I have the right one, yes. I will hand you the review by one of our school, actually an 8th grade English teacher at High Springs Community School. And she reviewed the book. And I will refer you to Dr. Marul's objection form, where she objects to specific pages. And Miss Stacy Korn, 8th grade English teacher, addressed her objections on the form that's in our evidence, specifically with respect to page 7, Jam's mother was the result of a rape, but it's not described as a rape in this book. It's called the result of a monster's monstering. But this is in a fantastical kind of book anyway, and that could mean most anything. There's no depiction or description of actual sexual intercourse or anything inappropriate. It's a monster's monstering. In a world where creatures come out of paintings, this is a non-specific allusion or description that could allude to a supernatural event. Page 132. The characters are discussing emotional abuse and indicators of child abuse with no specifics at all. And I would comment that it is permitted under Florida law to instruct kids on recognizing inappropriate touching, inappropriate being hurt by an adult. It is appropriate to protect our children from having that occur. The next page that Dr. Marul objects to is 137 to 139. Redemption, who is Jam's best friend, Redemption's brother Moses, now all of a sudden little brother, doesn't want help with his baths anymore. And Redemption recalls that he saw bruises on Moses. There's no, they look at him not wanting to have a bath with people around or bruises, and it described what they had seen in a pamphlet on abuse. So they are concerned that something is maybe going on, but there's nothing specific that talks about any of the forbidden words. On 169, the little boy admits he was not supposed to talk about it or people would get hurt. And that's a familiar refrain of abusers to the people they abuse is don't talk. Don't tell on me. There's nothing specific about what was done to him, however. Finally, we get to page 173. Hibiscus, the uncle. They put all the pieces together and discover he has become a monster. And they remember what happened about the monster's monstering. And it's a magical, fictional monster, but now we've placed it with someone that is in the world with Jam and Redemption. On page 179, Redemption asks his uncle, "Tell me how long you've been hurting my brother." It's vague, no descriptions of how the brother has been hurt. On page 186, a child has been hurt. What happened to the man who did this to me? That's all that is asked. Again, no specifics about what was done to the child. On page 188 and 189, I just have those feelings, Hibiscus said. I need help, my boy. I need to fight them for so very long, but they were powerful, they overtook me. And this is a confession by Hibiscus of his abuse. But again, there's nothing specific in there that says what or he did to that child. And on pages 197 to 199, it has been decades. So Hibiscus had done this before, but when and where? Perhaps before the revolution, but nothing specific. But then there's an accusation. You knew, by the mother. You knew when you let him near my babies. You are a monster, to one of the officials. He had been open with all the details of what he has done, but again, it was non-specific. There's not a single depiction or description of sexual conduct as described in the statute or the book. We would contend, it's an interesting comment reflecting this as Mao's revolution, bad revolution. Well, it appears that the revolution in this book turns out to be pretty bad also, because it hid Hibiscus' desire to hurt small children. And it turns out that the revolution didn't solve all the problems. And that's the cautionary tale this book is about. And that's all I have to present.
You have no witnesses?
Pardon me?
No witnesses.
Oh, no, we are not calling any witnesses.
Thank you. Okay, now we can move to the closing statement.
Okay, thank you. Again, Ms. Siegel makes the argument for me. I mean, these are clear inferences and implications, and decoding text, we teach our students to decode inferences. And if we weren't going to decode the inference, then Animal Farm is just a bunch of chickens and sheep on a farm and has no other meaning. It is clear what this book implies. And there is a very simple formula for determining this book's appropriateness. We should ask, how would the state of Florida speak to children between the ages of 4 and 14 in their school library books about sexual orientation or gender identity? The answer is simple. Based on 2023 statutory amendments that prohibit instruction that addresses sexual orientation or gender identity, library books must support the educational mission and be aligned with the standard curriculum for children of these ages. The same question can be asked about the promotion of Marxist ideology with a similar answer. The fact that this book pushes both should make this decision quite simple. But when you add the demonic layer, it's a no-brainer. This author truly believes that she is an evil spirit, an OGBANJE, a child demon which is born over and over again into the same family line to cause death and destruction. Quote, the possibility that I was an OGBANJE occurred to me around the same time I realized I was trans, the author wrote in the article I shared in my opening statement. Before she goes on to describe the self-mutilation she sought to destroy her reproductive organs. If anything is inappropriate for our youths, it should be this. But is there anything that this district will find inappropriate for children? I actually don't think that there is. Both the staff attorney and the district media specialist have said many times on the record that any book that gets a child to read is a good book, and that any book on their shelves deserves to stay on their shelves. This belief system is reinforced in this text by the statement that says, quote, all knowledge is good knowledge, uttered by the phallic-centric demon. And it's highlighted by the behavior of the librarian character who insists on providing texts to the protagonists regardless of their parents' permission. The parallels surpass words at this point. In closing, I will leave you yet again with this warning, one that I shared in a previous hearing and you did not like to hear, but you need to listen to it because it comes from a higher power than I, and one that I recommend you heed. Quote, if anyone causes one of these little ones who believe in me to stumble, it would be better for him to have a large millstone hung around his neck and to be drowned in the depths of the sea.
Thank you. Attorney Siegel, your closing.
It is sad to end with the kind of threat that was just made to all of us that are here, that we all somehow or another are harming little children and should be cast into the deep. I'm also confounded by the willingness of Keith Perry to come in here and talk about what the law says when Marul asks him about certain training slides. And I will tell you that none of those training slides are in any statute. None of those training slides are in any rule of administrative procedure. They are created by a committee, and there is a great deal of, as you've heard before, of problems with those slides. They're being renovated because they do not reflect the actual statutory language. The selection criteria for these books and the basis for objections for these books has nothing to do with political ideology. And the fact that Crystal Marul is offended by Marxism is not the basis for an objection. The other thing, before I get into more specifics, is you will recall an admission by Dr. Marul that she asked the district to restrict her child to not read any book that did not meet the selection criteria. So she herself is putting a burden on the district of trying to ascertain what in her mind is selection criteria. And as is now clear, this is the 6th hearing, we differ greatly on what selection criteria is. The irony also is she's objected to 6 books, all of which are at the elementary school library of where her child is a student. And yet she has never once asked us to take those specific books off. So as much of a burden as Mr. Perry thinks it would be for a parent to search for objectionable things, it's not a burden when you take the time to do the presentations that have been made before this hearing officer on these 6 books over the last several months. Yet she never asked us to restrict her child's access to that book. As I've said, this is now the 6th hearing. She's made more than just 6 objections. She has made 16 challenges now. We have agreed with 6 of them. And being an old math teacher, that's a 37.5%. She also did not go further on 2 objections, so that makes it really 8 that are apparently the system worked. And 8 out of 16 is 50%. So 50% of the time, we have heard her objections. But to suggest that because we have disagreed with her these next 6 times, we are somehow victimizing this parent who has a retired lawyer working with her and advising her and giving her ideas of what to say is inappropriate, and that testimony should be disregarded altogether. This is the first of these 6 hearings, however, where she complained that the book had inappropriate depictions and descriptions of sexual conduct. You didn't hear much of that. You heard all about Marxist, Leninist, revolution, and all that stuff. But what she hasn't done, if this book depicts and describes inappropriate sexual conduct, she knows she has the right as a parent to go before the school board, because she's objected to this book, and to read those portions of the book that are inappropriate depictions and descriptions of sexual conduct. And she has not availed herself of that right. Why hasn't she? Because she knows the procedure's there, but the reason she hasn't gone is there's nothing in this book that depicts or describes inappropriate sexual conduct. The other thing that occurred to me as I was deciding what to talk about today is that the mother of Jam was described as the product of a monster's monstering. In a fantastical world, is that something that necessarily describes a vaginal birth or any kind of birth? No, it does not. In fact, most of our kids learned that the goddess Athena in Greek ideology sprang full-blown from the forehead of her father. And does that describe any sexual conduct? No. This is a mystical, fantastical book. And how is a monster monstering different than a full-grown goddess emerging? It's still something that's fantastical, and it's not a specific description or depiction of any sexual conduct. There was an awful lot of conduct about blood offerings and satyrs and all kinds of stuff that's not in the book at all, and should be disregarded. Freedom to Read Florida posts a weekly update of the status of book challenges in all 67 counties. This book is on the list for being objected to in 5 counties. It is pending here, although the district has recommended it stay on the shelf. It is pending in Escambia. But it was not removed from some of the more conservative counties in the state. It was not removed in Santa Rosa, it was not removed in Collier, and it was not removed in Manatee. Manatee and Collier did keep it on the shelves, but restricted the age, maybe to 8th grade, maybe we have it at 6th grade and above. I'm not sure what age, they didn't list that in the book. But at High Springs Community, it's restricted to 6th grade and above. High Springs Community is K through 8, and the 5th graders are not allowed to take books out of that restricted area, but 6th through 8 can take it out. The district people, at the school people, found unanimously at the school level it should be kept on the shelves. No one at the school level, and these are the people that know the kids the best, restricted it to a higher level. And that is on those sheets within our exhibits that have the actual written comments of all the people. I showed you Ms. Corns. But it was also found unanimously at the district level to keep it on the shelf, and the district, no one recommended the book be restricted to in age or grade. It's appropriate at 6 through 8, and that's where it should stay. We will request that you find the book should remain on the shelves. It's restricted already to grade 6 and above, and we would request you make this recommendation to the school board that they maintain the book on the shelves with those restrictions. Thank you.
Closing statements. With that, I will render a recommended order, and it will be submitted to the school board within a reasonable time from the date of this hearing. Each party will receive a copy of my recommended order. The school board, at a regular business meeting, will make the final determination as to the disposition of this case. Petitioner, Dr. Morrell, you will have an opportunity to attend the school board meeting and to speak on this item at that board meeting. You have a right to submit objections to the school board prior to that meeting if you have any objections to my recommendation. You will be allowed 10 minutes to address the board. Staff Attorney, Attorney Siegel, will be allowed 10 minutes to respond. The board will consider the recommended order, and after taking input from either party, reviewing any material submitted, and taking public comment, shall render a final order. Does either party have any questions?
I do have a question. As I indicated in the request for my postponement, it'll be very likely that I'm out of the country when this hits the school board. May I have a proxy to present my 10-minute presentation before the school board? And what would the procedures be for that?
Dr. Jackson, we have informed her already that we would postpone this being heard before the school board until she returns in August. I've already told her that.
I would have to go back and reread the email. What I understood is that you said it would be seen before my departure at the school board.
No, ma'am, I never said that. I said we would only object to moving this hearing, but we would, the recommended order that's entered by Dr. Jackson will not go before the school board until late July or August, whenever you are back. And the hearing on the other book that we had scheduled for May at your request will also be heard in August when you're back. So that's what the email said.
I have asked for some modifications of the timeline because additional constraints have been added to the procedures. So anticipating how much work these take has changed over time and hence has made me need to request a postponement. However, I would be fine if it was presented before the school board in the timely fashion that it normally is, if I can give a proxy to do my 10 minutes.
I'm not familiar with proxy rules with the board. No.
I would just like to ask perhaps my assistant Bob or someone else to read my 10-minute statement.
I would have to, I'm not familiar with proxies for the board meet. I'm not familiar. Attorney Siegel, are you?
I have no objection. I was trying to accommodate her request.
Okay.
Because one of the complaints she had about this hearing today was her inability, and she did not request in her email use of a proxy. Let me give you some background. We had initially scheduled all the rest of the hearings on the books that she's objected to be in these couple months before the end of the school year. Dr. Marule objected because of the timing, so we moved it at her request to have this one on the 30th today, and then have another one in May, and she said, I can appear by proxy or by Zoom. And we agreed to that, and that was fine. And then just last week, I think it was, I'm not sure exactly when, she objected then, she wanted all of these moved, including the one in May and including this hearing. And the reason she wanted
Miss
this,
Bessie
excuse
Jackson,
me,
Hold on.
I just don't understand why asking for an extension is so adversarial.
Mira, hold on a moment, please. Let Attorney Siegel, and then I'll come to you. Go ahead, Attorney Siegel.
I'm just stating the facts of what occurred. What occurred when she objected to have it, she wanted all of these moved, I suggested that we would keep this hearing where it was because we knew she would be in town. We knew she was going to be, she told us she was out of town in May and June. And so we said, her concern about this hearing was if it went to the board within 2 to 4 weeks, she would not be here. So we said, what we will do is let's go ahead and have the hearing and get one more thing done. And then we will postpone that until August when you get back. And we will be happy to move the other hearing, even though we'd already moved it once at her request, to August. And I'm sorry you think it's adversarial, Dr. Marule, but we have been accused of changing procedures all the time for no good purpose, and I'm just saying,
Well,
we've all changed
may I
the
speak now, or?
procedures.
Let me get some clarity here, understand
Yeah.
for me. So the recommended order for today for PET will not go before the board until June or July.
Well, actually, she told us she'd be out of town May and June.
Oh,
So
it'll be
I said
July.
late July or August, figuring right before the school year. August would be fine because the school year has started then. And I thought that would accommodate her request to be present herself before the board. Now she's asking if she could just have them go before the board by proxy within a couple of weeks. And I have no objection to that. I was just trying to accommodate her.
So, Dr. Marule, you have a proxy for this recommended order PET to go before the board in the timely manner, which usually is within the next board meeting, if possible.
It is possible that I misread the email. I understood that in the email, and I could have misunderstood it. This is not supposed to be antagonistic. It's just about logistics. I may have misunderstood, but I thought what Ms. Siegel said when she denied my request to move this hearing was that the school board meeting would take place before I departed. But I don't think that's going to likely happen, so I was asking, in the case that it didn't happen before I departed, if I could have a proxy. If you want to submit the order in July, I really don't have a concern. We can do it in July or August. What I don't appreciate, though, is the
Hold on, let me get clarity first. Let me get this recommended order for myself here. So when is your departure, Dr. Marule?
May 10th,
So you return in,
July.
so would you prefer, that the recommended order is there before your departure so you can speak on your behalf? Or do you want to delay it? Or do you want to be in the timely manner in May with a proxy? You have 3 different choices here. What would you prefer?
I think I would prefer a proxy because I'd like the process to terminate, within its normal time frame.
So
I
if we
don't
go
think it would
after May
happen.
10th, you would have a proxy. Before May 10th, you would be there?
Correct, but I don't think you'll meet the May 10th deadline because we're still waiting for the last hearing's recommended order to be presented before the board. And I don't want 2 at one because there's the burden of labor on me to prepare for these things is enormous.
So you want the proxy, and the proxy is available anytime after May 10th? Is that right? Ms.
Pretty much, and when I say proxy, pretty much I'll write the statement and they stand there and read it.
So, but the information would go to Dr. Marule for the date of the hearing? Where would it go?
What our procedure is, we set the, we get the recommended order and we set the hearing. It's got to be noticed more than 7 days before the school board meeting by law. And so we have to do, if it's not ready, I doubt this will be ready for the next, when is the next board meeting? May 7th is the next board meeting, so it would probably be 14 days after that, May 21st.
So you would have a proxy May 20th.
So if she would prefer to appear by proxy, I had agreed to let it go until August if she wanted to appear personally.
So you would accept a proxy on May 21st?
That was my request.
Okay, thank you. Now, the next question, for your next book, the last book that we have the form for, that's set for August. That date hasn't been set yet, but you will be willing for
The later, the better.
the hearing in August.
Later August because
Okay.
of summer plans and school starting up, and there's a lot going on. So ideally early September, but late August would be okay.
Okay, so the next hearing will be in late August. Okay. So we have a clear understanding, May 21st with proxy for the recommended order?
If ma'am, you can have it ready by the May 21st, because Aiden has taken longer than that, the last hearing, but I do believe that my assistant would be available, if not May 21st, 14 days after that, right, which would be June 3rd?
We'll go
School
for
board
May
meetings are the
21st.
first and the third Tuesday of each month. So whatever the first Tuesday is in June would be the next board meeting.
3rd is what I think.
Okay, so you prefer June 3rd rather than May 21st?
I'm just being realistic about how the timeline's played out. For you to have the time to write the recommended order, it probably won't be the May 21st
All right, we'll see.
meeting.
It
But
depends.
it doesn't really matter, whichever day it falls on.
Either date, long as I have the recommended order ready. Okay, I agree. Okay, are there any other questions?
Where do you want the orders and the
I'll still have,
letters and notices for the next hearing to be sent
I
to?
will still have access to my email, and there will still be people in my house, so it's fine. Nothing needs to change.
Okay, so that's understood. The notices will still go to Dr. Marul. Okay. All right, hearing no other questions, this meeting is adjourned. This hearing, I'm sorry.